Hi Chris, how are you?
Good evening, Rod. Yeah, I'm well. Here we are. It's episode 201. Look at that, 201. That's not bad effort, is it? I've got to be happy with that. And it's the 30th of November, so it's the last day of the month.
It is, and I'm going to take it to task because it's good afternoon, not good evening, but there we go.
It is good afternoon. You're right. I think I just feel tired, so I'm wishing the day away.
It's been a long day. Haven't you got some Formula One thing to go and watch? That's going to make your day even longer.
That's my thing of the week, so we get to that at the end of the show, I reckon.
Okay, fair enough. I won't ask too many questions about that then.
Weather. What's the weather? Come on. We always have a weather check-in.
It's mostly okay, I got to say. The sun's been out. I was sat in my living room this morning and the sun was reflecting off the water and coming straight through my window. But then we had a little rain shower, so it's okay.
Sounds beautiful. Do you know what? We've got a little bit of sun here. It's looking all right.
Have you looked at the long-range forecast for the UK?
No.
Snow.
Oh.
Yeah, I know.
Really?
Yeah.
When?
Well, like next weekend, they're saying snow.
Man, I got loads of travel coming up.
So do I. I have to attend a funeral, unfortunately, this week. So I'm off to Scotland on Wednesday, which means I might be in amongst it.
Sorry, mate. I'm sorry to hear that.
That's all right. It's not a direct relative, but a very close friend of mine. Unfortunately, his father passed away. So I'm going to go up and show my respects and be around for the family and all that kind of stuff. It'd be a very small cog in what's a very terrible time for somebody. But yeah, I think it's a nice thing to go and do.
It's the right thing to do, isn't it?
It is the right thing to do. And, you know, I knew the gentleman reasonably well once upon a time, and it's just these things are sad. But it does mean I've got a fair bit of travel coming up. Yeah,
you live a long way away from Scotland.
I do live a long way away from Scotland, so yeah, we'll see how that goes. Once again, I get to drag my electric car north of the wall. So
yeah, fair play to you. That is a good effort. Sorry for listeners, you may have heard my fan kick in that heats the shed. I've just turned that off.
Yeah, we can't be having any heat in your shed. You've got to suffer, Chris.
Hopefully it's warm enough. It's 21 degrees. I'm hoping it's going to see us through.
I hope it will. Should we do some follow-up?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's dive into it.
First up then, and I will say from the top, and this is a recurring theme this year, we've struggled for stories this week a little bit. Not to put too much of a dampener on the podcast, I think we found some good ones, but it's definitely been quieter, and it's Thanksgiving weekend, of course, in the United States, so that doesn't help.
But I do think that's the theme of 25 from a tech perspective. And I've said it quite a lot in the show. I think it's just there's not been really anything that exciting this year. Apple's big redesign wasn't very exciting. The hardware has been very good, but not overly exciting. The Switch 2, good, but very iterative. And it's quite interesting talking to my children for Christmas. Like, there's not really a lot of tech they're after, and they're quite tech-orientated teenagers because there's just not that much out there. My son really doesn't know what to want. He's 12. And he was like, should I get a Switch 2? I'm not sure. Quite fancy one. Not that bothered. And he keeps you flip-flopping. And it's really interesting because at their age, I was super into tech. And obviously when we were 12 and 14, tech was moving at quite a pace. Whereas now the tech is so good. It just feels like everything's slowed down this year. But maybe we'll get into January and there'll be some huge announcement and they'll be like, whoa, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, I got to say, I mean, we'll do our usual hopes for the year, I think, one of these episodes in December. And I think high amongst mine is this very cheap MacBook that's sort of promised. I think could be a bit of a game changer when it comes to these things. However, what's in front of us for now are the EU apparently thinking Apple Maps may be big enough to be considered a DMA gatekeeper. This is quite an interesting sort of turn. I mean, I always think of Google Maps are what most people use. But I know you've said repeatedly that your default is Apple Maps.
So I got into Apple Maps when I had my BMW because Apple Maps would appear in the cluster, I guess, the digital cluster, whereas the other maps like Waze wouldn't until very late on. About that point, I got rid of that car. And that's why I got into Apple Maps because I was like, well, I want it in the cluster. And it just worked better with the BMW at that time, which I probably think this is fair. Apple Maps, Google Maps, I would imagine Google Maps is like 70% and Apple Maps is 30% globally. I don't know. And I guess there's other localized ones. Actually, it's probably more Waze than Google Maps, isn't it?
I wouldn't have said so. I mean, let's face it, most people jumping on a train or something like that aren't using Waze for that. It's only drivers are going to be using Waze. And if you're
fair point.
And if you're an Uber driver or something like that, I think you can just choose the default map that comes with the phone. So if you've only got Apple Maps, it works with that. So I think they're embedded. Both of them are embedded like your BMW would embed on its digital display. Apple Maps. It very much depends on what you use it for. If you're walking, you might use either. If you're driving, you might use either. So I think the rule is you must have 45 million monthly active end users and 10,000 yearly business users. How they define those things, I'm not entirely sure, for the past 3 financial years. And I got to think, for the amount of iPhones that you see, even just in the UK, they're going to be well over 45 million active monthly users.
I'd have said so. I use Apple Maps a lot. I think it's pretty good. I'm very comfortable with it. I think it's actually one of their better apps because they do iterate on it year over year, unlike Apple Music.
I think it's good enough. What's particularly interests me about this story is it's not only Maps, this applies to other Apple products as well, which we've already seen with Messages wasn't considered large enough. The App Store was considered large enough, but this also includes ads. And one of the recent stories was ads are going to be part of Apple Maps going forward. And you may not be familiar with this because you're not a Waze user or a Google Maps user. As Waze particularly, when you roll up at a set of traffic lights and stop, you'll get an advert for a nearby business, like go to Starbucks, go to KFC, go to that kind of thing within the actual mapping. So if this is the kind of thing Apple are talking about adding to their maps as well, and ads are also part of this is an interesting development.
Oh, that now you've told me that about Waze, that would really annoy me. I think I did comment a few months ago now. I was with a friend, he had Waze in his car. Waze is very needy when you're driving. Acknowledge this. Like there's a car park, you're at traffic lights, there's roadworks. And to be fair to Apple Maps, nobody reports anything in it. So it never really wants your attention, which is actually, I think, quite good in many ways because it just felt like Waze wanted you to interact with it way more than what it should.
Sure, but it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? The fact that when you're using Waze, or actually because I have Google Maps in my Volvo, when you're using them, those alerts are incredibly useful. The fact that you'll suddenly get vehicles stopped in lane, within the next whatever distance it is, instantly, that is incredibly useful to you as a driver.
Yeah, I would concur with that. Less so when it's like there's a car parked up on the hard shoulder, it's a non-event. But I agree with you in lane and stuff, and massive potholes as well.
Massive potholes, police on the heart, police spotted nearby, vehicles, roadworks have just popped up. All that kind of stuff is very real time because of the amount of people that use Waze and Google Maps. And you can report these things in Apple Maps. It's just even more awkward to do so. So I think it's a double. And the ads thing, it's not when you're in motion. When you're actually stopped at a set of traffic lights, it's fine. It's not a big deal. It doesn't drive you that crazy. If Apple do a sensitive implementation of it, I'm kind of all right with it. But the longer term effect of this is, A, what impact does it have on the app? And ultimately, how much interest will the EU have in them for being a gatekeeper app?
Yeah, that's true. And what we don't want is the app doesn't get developed or moved on in those regions because Apple can't be bothered to deal with the DMA in the EU.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting the company has responded to this, that it said Maps has very limited usage in the EU compared to its competitors, and Apple Ads isn't a major player. That may be fair. I'm not sure Apple Ads is a major player, or at least it's a very poor one.
But is that going to change? Because like you said, there's talk of way more ads coming into Apple Maps, which I'm annoyed Apple are going this way because I always thought their premium was they weren't like the others, but they seem to be turned into the others to drive that service revenue.
Yeah, they very much are. Somebody else that we've talked about recently is Rivian. They've obviously announced a new e-bike. I think you and I both quite liked it for being a little bit different. You power the motor, not the wheels particularly, and then the motor powers the wheels. It's definitely a different looking thing. However, this journalist from The Verge, Andrew Hawkins, which I'm not going to scroll because I'll get you the usual ad block from The Verge when I do, likes it. It's the software is actually what's won him over for making use of this bike. And I think this is good news for e-bikes. They're definitely a potentially transformative tool. We shouldn't be in cars as much as we are. We should be able to cycle, 5 miles to work or something like that and back within that sort of radius. Anything that can make it easier at a decent price, and the fact that the software can be changed in these things as they come in many other things, can only be a positive thing.
It looks interesting. I'm not bowled over by the design of it that much, I must confess, but you're right. I was in London just last week and I'll be back in London this week. It needs a better way of moving people around. The tubes are too busy, the buses are busy, taxis can barely move, cars, I wouldn't even want to drive around London in a car. So there's got to be a better way of getting people moving, and why not get them exercise at the same time? Like, surely this is a big win.
It is a big win. I'm okay with the design of this bike. I mean, a lot of the problems with your sort of traditional high-frame mountain bike thing is people with disabilities or shorter people really struggle to swing a leg over them because of the way the frames are. And this is obviously designed to make it easier to get onto. I also like the fact that it looks to have proper suspension on it as well. The way that the swing arm here is attached to the frame looks like it's actually going to move a little bit, and it's got shock absorbers at the front, upside-down shock absorbers at that. Very cool, very trick. So this is probably quite a nice, comfortable bike to cycle on.
It's just a big square bit, isn't it? Where the pedals are, just looks weird for a bike. But I kind of get it. I think they're doing something different, and why not?
Yeah, and fair enough. I mean, the cars look a little bit different. The trucks look a little bit different. Anyway, I am curious to see if they come in the UK, because the R1S, no, that's the R1T and S were the previous ones. There's a smaller Rivian 2, and that might be better for European and UK roads.
Right, okay. Yeah, I haven't got my eye on it at the moment, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So, worth keeping an eye on, these sort of personal mobility things. Do you want to tell us what Epic and Valve are up to?
Well, I'm guessing Epic's up to using lots of AI, and Valve, the people who run the Steam store, they have their games disclose whether they've got AI in them, and Epic want to stop this because I'm guessing Epic are writing all their games with a bit of generative AI, and I wouldn't be surprised if more games do it, but I don't understand. I don't really get why this is a big issue. If you're using generative AI, just say it. I'm using generative AI, but the game's amazing, so it doesn't matter. And if you're not using it, lean into it. Look, this is handcrafted, artisanal game. Lean into it would be my view. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting. Steam already have a sort of warning that you're meant to fill in to say you have used generative AI as part of your game. And Call of Duty Black Ops 7 has come into a lot of flack, that's the pun not intended, for its the fact that it does use generative AI for sort of player trophies and cards and things like that, and they've had a lot of pushback. The game hasn't sold particularly well, it's not been received particularly well by fans, and then you've got this generative AI thing as well. And they haven't been particularly slammed for it by reviewers, but they absolutely have by fans. So what Tim Sweeney's saying here is that generative AI is a thing, get over it, basically, to Valve. And Valve are pushing back, going, no, you just need to say that, as you said, that this game was developed using generative AI. And I think it's fair enough you should be explicit and honest with your users. If you want that carefully crafted, handmade as much as possible these days game, you should be proud of that. It's a selling point, actually, for many people who don't want to see increasing amounts of generative AI slop. Speaking of which, I went to the cinema. We'll talk about that a little bit. Have you seen the Coca-Cola advert, this year's Coca-Cola advert?
No, I've not really seen any adverts, I don't think.
I'm surprised. I don't watch a lot of television, but I presume it's on television as well. It's the usual holidays are coming and shows that.
I know the kind of advert you mean.
It's full of generative AI slop. It's horrible.
Oh, okay. Oh, it seems to be the way we're going. But I guess this is the point, though. As the years progress, we're going to have more slop, aren't we? Because that's just the world we live in now, where you're going to have more generative AI because games are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And companies are, studios are struggling to make money, and therefore surely this is their way of bridging the gap between cost and massive games is to procedurally generate stuff with AI.
Okay, I mean you could be setting yourself up for a fall at the same time, though, couldn't you? Because it's a bit self-feeding. I mean, for example, I learned the other day that Nvidia loaned OpenAI $500 million or something like that to purchase its own graphics cards. Isn't that a bit circular, though? Because you're giving them money to buy your thing. I mean, it's some very creative accounting going on at the very low levels of this generative AI stuff. If you're putting it in your games and you're making, and we already seen Microsoft saying 30% of their code or something is going to be generative. If and when the bubble bursts, your dependency on this technology is going to be vast, and you're not going to have skilled people to do it. So you're just setting yourselves up for a fall. I genuinely think so.
Yeah, I agree with you. Sorry, I was just trying to think about that. Hang on, you got a couple of comments in there. One, Nvidia loaned OpenAI X number of dollars to buy Nvidia's gear. Surely that's cooking your own books because you're paying for your own sales. I don't know how that happens for especially a publicly listed company.
Creative accounting.
Exceptionally creative. You could imagine the CFO giving himself a round of applause as he's like, I've just backed my own horse. Like, this is fantastic. So there's that one. What was the other point we just made? That's completely blown my mind.
About generative AI writing code for people and de-skilling.
I get this in that I've used a little bit of it just when I'm messing around with my own projects, right? I'm checking code, I'm asking for things. Often it gives me code that doesn't work, and then you go, this code doesn't work, and they're like, oh yeah, we just correct that for you. It's like, well, how do you give me code that doesn't work? And I do worry that people, like really in-depth programmers, are going to become fewer and fewer and far further between as we rely more upon these tools. It is a big concern. And I don't know I wonder, is a regular programmer today going to have the worth of like a Fortran programmer today in 10 years' time? Because regular programmers are just going to go by the wayside. But at some point when we want to do new and exciting things, is generative AI going to be the right tool to do that? Is it going to be able to develop new things? I haven't seen it yet.
It's not though, is it? Because that's not the way they work. They parse existing things to work with what's current. That's why they need a lot of documentation on the kind of programming models we've got. It's why we've got really good ones for C and JavaScript and Python and R and things like that, but less for Swift, because there's less Swift code in the wild.
Yeah, there is less Swift, and I like that I can code a little bit, but it's hard to keep up with all the new stuff, isn't it, I guess?
It is. And you understand why programmers would depend on it for a crutch. Anyway, we're a bit off topic. I've put in the show notes, and for those watching on YouTube, a Yahoo Finance article on the circular investments Nvidia is making in these. So I didn't make this up. It's a thing. And to be fair, I got the number a little bit wrong. I think I said 500 million. It was actually 23.7 billion that they invested in OpenAI.
Mind blowing. I'm sorry. I don't understand.
And we already talked about how much OpenAI lost this year, right?
Yeah. It's just crazy, isn't it?
It's vast amounts of money. It's a Ponzi scheme, I'm beginning to think.
But if the bubble does burst, it could be huge.
It's going to affect more than just tech, isn't it? Because
it feels like the 2008 dodgy AAA rated bonds or whatever it was. If you've watched, what's the film?
The Big Short.
The Big Short. It feels a bit like that, doesn't it? Like we've got this AAA Nvidia that's actually backed up, like that's self-propelling itself.
If you think the top 7 performing companies in the world at the moment are all United States tech firms, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, OpenAI, they're all dependent on this stuff. When it goes wrong, it's going to go wrong for everyone, because all the stocks, all the pension markets, all the ISAs, all that kind of stuff that are linked to the stock market are part of that. So we are talking, I wouldn't call it an extinction level event, but it's this is why everybody's so convinced that we've got to keep on this train, because when it goes bang, like these things generally do, we could be in a world of hurt.
We can't afford for it to go bang.
But is it sustainable?
That's a very good question. How these companies lose so much money is just crazy, isn't it?
I mean, it is still going, and I think you and I had said, this looks a bit dodgy by the end of this year. Maybe next year's prediction is all gone, or 2 years. But I don't see how it can be infinitely sustainable with this amount of loss, with this circular financing, with the amount of what it costs in data, water, power, servers. We've got a story in a minute about memory. It all has an impact.
I think the problem is everybody's just borrowing from everybody else. Nobody owns anything anymore or is profitable anymore. It's just everything's just held together with string and sticky tape.
And that's a Ponzi scheme. And I'm going to change the subject and talk about.
Yeah, we need to move on.
Did you pick up your Apple sock thing?
No, I did not. I am still very much a caseless kind of guy.
Well, I think you've missed out here, because they've stopped selling it, it would seem. It was very limited edition, Izzy Miyake, and it may well be worth something. So even though it was only sold in 8 countries, it's now not selling in any of them. If you had your chance to get them, too bad.
I'm all right with it. I think I'm all right with it. I'm not normally somebody to buy something to then sell it in the future. That's not. I buy something because I want it today.
I genuinely don't understand this product.
No, I concur with that statement.
But I don't think you and I are in any sort of position to give people fashion advice anyway, are we?
I'm not sure we're the target demographic for this, are we?
Amongst our many skills, that's definitely not one.
Agreed.
Something else we talked about last week was there was another generation of Snapdragon chips coming to computers. We talked about how Microsoft were beginning to export it, and there was a gaming technology as part of their Rosetta equivalent Prism, is it? I think it's called their Rosetta equivalent translation technology. So this all seemed very good, but immediately then we have bad news in that Tuxedo Computers, who are a major manufacturer of Linux-specific laptops and desktops, have gone off the ARM Snapdragon chip because they just can't get driver support from Qualcomm to be able to write all the firmware to be able to cope with all the sort of changes in it, software translation things from ARM to Intel. So this is bad when manufacturers actually decide it's too much hassle. And Tuxedo they're a reseller in one sense. They buy Medion computers and things like that from the Chinese market, do some changes to them and put their own badges on them. But they're well-regarded computers. They're not quite Framework or Apple sort of level or Lenovo level, but they're actually quite well regarded in the Linux world, and they always have good support for all the programs that you're going to want to run in Fedora or Ubuntu or one of these things. But they've given up after sort of 9 to 11 months of trying to develop Linux on ARM. They just say it's too much effort and they've stopped.
That's such a shame, isn't it? Because it really feels like this is ARM's moment, does it not?
It does, but ARM isn't the only horse in this, is it? AMD haven't gone away, and you've got RISC-V chips, as we've talked about a couple of times as well, which are more or less an open source implementation of this kind of stuff. I think that licensing deals for ARM are a bit egregious, actually. Apple sort of absorbing them and the rest of it. Qualcomm obviously absorbing them, but you do have to pay, is it the ARM Foundation, whoever the original sort of progenitors of ARM are, a sort of licensing fee for doing this. So it could be that in itself leads to closed source firmware, and we see it actually in Apple land that M1 and M2 chips are supported on Linux through the developers' efforts, but we've seen no progress on M3 or M4. You can still only run up to M2 on Linux, and we've had M5s. So that sort of changes in firmware really impact ARM developers trying to make other operating systems run. And if you think, we've talked before about, never mind consumer stuff trying to run Linux in the desktop, a lot of the world's server operating systems run in Linux. This is potentially quite impactful for ARM and the server.
Yeah, it's interesting because it felt like all roads lead to ARM, but not in this scenario with Tuxedo computers. So I'm a little surprised by that, because it must be really hard if they're doing that. Because certainly back in the late 90s, all roads led to the Intel 86 chipset. And for quite a long time there afterwards, for like the next 20 years, from sort of 95 to 2015. And then really the ARM instruction set's taken over. And here we are 10 years into that. So I'm surprised to hear this.
Yeah, it's... For a developer like this who is German-based, and you think we've talked about all the German desktops that are going into German government, police forces, etc., that are Linux-based, all of these users would want a laptop that would have better battery, better performance, all the things that we know ARM chips are good for. So it must be quite upsetting to them to give up on it, because presumably they're not a massive company. They'll have put some developer resource, technical resource into this, and it's not paid off for them. So it's a shame.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sadly, I think it is a shame, but maybe they'll come back to it, in 12 months. Who knows?
Maybe they will. As it's the Thanksgiving weekend, we've had a Black Friday, and I presume we're going to have a Cyber Monday. Did you buy anything at all on Black Friday?
Sorry, I'm searching deep in my mind. I haven't yet. I was half debating a pair of AirPods Pro 3, because if you buy them on apple.com, they give you a 40 quid gift voucher, which makes them about 180 quid. So that's £40 off, which seems okay. And that 40 quid for me will pay for 1 month of my Apple One, basically, because they give me a gift card. So that's the only thing I've been tempted with. I've been trying to chivvy my kids along, because if they want me to order anything for Christmas for them, I would like to get it by close play tomorrow. Feels like a lot of places are doing, just like Amazon did a 2-week Black Friday event, and a lot of places are basically doing Friday to Monday night as one event, rather than having a Black Friday and a Cyber Monday. I think companies are trying to stretch it out a bit, so they're not just rammed in a very short period of time, and they're spacing it out. How about you?
Nothing tech related. I bought shoes and socks and stuff like that. Oh, I tell a lie. I did actually buy one thing Black Friday related. I bought a new Ubiquiti Unify router.
There was me thinking I'm teeing you up because I knew what you bought, and you just massively disappointed me for a second.
But then, I thankfully, my brain actually worked. No, I bought a new Dream Router 7, which is a Wi-Fi 7 device that's also a Unify management controller. It does all the video stuff, all the security stuff. It can do door access and all that kind of stuff, as well as being the fundamental operating system. Oh, and the NAS stuff as well. But being the fundamental operating system for running multiple Unify devices. It's a 3.5 gigs IPS switch, so it can take up to 3.5 gigs inbound internet, which is quite impressive for a little device. It has 4 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports on the back, one of which is PoE, and 1 10 gigabits per second WAN port on the back of it as well. So it's quite a significant device, as well as being a Wi-Fi 7 router.
Yeah, so you and I have been having back and forth on Unify because I was like, I'm thinking about upgrading. I haven't quite got my head into it. I'm yo-yoing, but I haven't bought anything yet. But you were lucky to get this because this was in their Black Friday deal, and then they basically went, we sold out. They didn't even take further back orders, did they? They just said sold out, done. But that device, for the money involved and for what it does, and probably quite a great device for a lot of people that just need one Wi-Fi device to do their whole house, because it feels like you get Wi-Fi 7, which most new iPhones support, whereas most Macs are still on 6E, which is the previous standard. But you're also getting multi-gigabit LAN ports on it. Like, it just sounds like a great device for somebody that just needs one device to do everything.
Yeah, it exactly was. It was 212 quid. It was 40 quid off, I think, once we added in the VAT as well. So it's a really great, if you want to get into the Unify ecosystem, it's a great place to start. If you're running a business or a small to medium enterprise, you need one of the more dedicated switches and switched routers that they've got. But this is just a nice little R2D2 shaped device that you can bung in the corner of your room, and you've got Wi-Fi 7 just like that. And it will expand, up to I think 30 other Unify devices. So even though it's quite a small device, it's quite a powerful one, quite a performant one. And I had one of these. I had the original Dream Router, which was a Wi-Fi 5 device. It's that old. I think I bought it in 2019. It was my original entry to the Unify Ubiquiti ecosystem. It's a really good device. I'm very pleased with it.
Yeah, so I'm giving it the side eye at the moment. It's just, for me to transition, I'm just trying to, like I say, work out the jump. But the device you bought looks fantastic.
And as a nice place to start, if you need to mesh together a couple of devices, or you want one PoE port to power another Unify, one of their wireless access points, this at least has one port on it. So you could immediately expand this into something else, connect to an existing switch. You don't need to jump in. So as a relatively cheap-ish jumping off point into the Unify ecosystem, I think it's a good place to start.
No, I think so. And yeah, I've got to work out what I'm going to do, I think. But it does look good. Their whole stuff looks great. And they've got such a great name. They're just well respected, aren't they, by lots of people. And I'm curious to dip my toe.
Ubiquiti curious. Should we do some news?
Let's do it.
So first up, and we sort of touched on this in one of the last stories about RAM prices being out of control. They totally are. They're so out of control that in America, at least, they're claiming that they're selling like lobster, i.e. new prices every day, depending on how it's going up and down. So it's not just a X amount of pounds or dollars for 32 gigs of DDR5 RAM or something. It's fluctuating on a daily basis as you go to sell it. And what's driving this is, of course, server farms and AI. We've been through this.
Not just Apple and iPhones, but server farms and AI.
Server farms and AI. So we're through the GPU side. Nvidia have got their money. Everybody's sitting with nice GPUs in their data centers. What they're lacking now is RAM, because a lot of the higher end models need lots and lots of RAM. So this is what's going. Lots of things are being affected by this. In fact, the speculation as to the Steam machine that we've been talking about the last few weeks, the reason they haven't announced the prices for that is because of this volatility in RAM pricing.
Yeah, I guess that makes it quite hard. I mean, it reminds me back in late 90s when I'd be buying a RAM for something, like you'd be waiting for the tier above to drop down to a price that you could afford. And you would, you'd have computer magazines and you'd be looking line by line for the spec you wanted and hopefully hitting the price. But wow, I didn't realize it had got this bad. But I wonder how Apple will deal with this. I guess Apple have got enough pre-built margin that they can absorb some fluctuation.
Yeah, but you think they've already absorbed the tariffs that Trump put on a lot of these products this year. That
hasn't been as scary as we thought, has it? The whole tariff for Apple piece.
Well, because everybody stood up to them, and Apple, bent the knee, didn't they, and gave lots of money and a nice gold trophy. But there's quite a nice quote in this Verge article. 3 months ago yesterday, I bought 32 gigs of RAM for my gaming PC, and that price for that exact kit has more than tripled since then. So in 3 months. It now costs $300 more, so it's up to $440 from $130. That's quite an increase.
That's crazy, isn't it? How is that right?
So if you needed RAM, you should have bought it 3 months ago.
But how do you know?
I'm feeling pretty good about the 32 gigs of RAM in my framework laptop, I got to say.
Yeah, I'm feeling quite happy I don't need to buy any kit at the moment.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see how Apple... Apple tend to buy in advance, don't they? So they've probably missed a lot of this, but if it stays volatile... your next Mac could be a bit more expensive.
Or have they got enough ring fence that they can avoid this and then start buying again when it drops?
Yeah.
It's tricky.
But then we know Apple already charges this level for their RAM anyway, so maybe they can just absorb the overhead.
It's crazy. It's quite a job to buy RAM at this scale, I would imagine.
It really is. Moving on, I hope Airbus have got their software updated. Actually, according to this story, they haven't. We've talked before about 747s needing floppy disks to update their software on board. This is apparently a major thing affecting all Airbus A320s. It takes about 2 hours to issue the patch. It's a bit crazy. It's crazy in my mind that you go along and you update the software firmware on an airplane. I guess it makes sense. Things change all the time, but A320 is potentially out of action. It could be affecting up to 13,000 passengers in Japan, for example. That's just 95 flights cancelled, and that's that phrase. But again, it's the Thanksgiving weekend, so American carriers who are running Airbus A320s could have been massively affected by this.
Wow. I couldn't believe it when this came out. And I mean, we did have a spate not that long ago when it was Boeing that were the ones really struggling. And it feels like it's Airbus's turn. But it's still worrying, isn't it? Would you want to be jumping on an Airbus A320 right now? I'm not sure I would.
Well, I mean, but to be fair to Airbus, their planes weren't falling out the sky like Boeing's were. You know, those two crashes related to software, the MCAS device within Boeing's 737 Maxes, is a very different thing to this, where, I mean, if you read the actual thing that's happened here, I'll read the announcement in its fullest. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency said it issued an emergency airworthiness directive after a problem manifested on a JetBlue American flight on October 30. Airbus said that an analysis of the event revealed that intense solar radiation may corrupt data critical to the functioning of flight controls. Quite important. Solar flares or bursts of electromagnetic radiation from the sun are known to cause radio blackouts and the disruption of satellite and GPS signals. To prevent further issues, the affected planes would have to revert to an earlier version of the software. So, I mean, it's fairly rare. It's not like it was a known problem that Boeing knew when they shoved the planes out of the door. Again, I'd rather not fly in a plane that you lost access to flight controls if you have a solar flare, and they're doing something about it. I think the pain of a 2-hour patch with plane out cycle is the right thing to do, though.
100%. Surely, like, it's worth patching it and ensuring safety than risking it. Like, I just wouldn't understand that world, but yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Like, yeah. It's just crazy. Like a 2-hour patch, and the way airplanes are run, and they've got such small turnaround windows, it's probably quite a challenge for them.
Yeah, they're not making money if they're not in the air. I mean, that's the way the airline industry think about it. That's why they keep an airframe 19, 20 years, and they want it in the air as much as they can be with as little downtime. This could affect up to 6,000 A320s. I mean, that's a lot of aircraft.
That's a huge amount of aircraft. And it's obviously a very common model, because it's certainly one I know I've been on. I don't know a lot about airplanes, but I know I've been on quite a few of those.
I think it's their sort of 737 variant, the A320. It's that sort of shorter hop sort of aircraft, so well in use by lots of carriers.
Yep, yeah, like European trips from here.
Yep, I'm trying to remember if I flew an Airbus A320 with JetBlue to the United States. In fact, I think I might have done that.
Maybe.
I could look back and find out, because my wonderful Flighty app tells me all that kind of stuff. Moving on, however, we talked before how it was weird that Apple who previously had a relationship with Red, who are a charity, an AIDS charity, I think they are. Apple and Red had nothing ongoing. However, they just announced an Apple Pay partnership for $3 million. This is really weird for a company that used to make product Red phones. Well, yeah, they did make a phone, didn't they? There was but certainly iPods, cases, all manner of things were product Red before. This seems like a really weird sudden partnership.
And it was a good Red. Like some of they were good Red cases. I think one of my parents have got one of the XR in Reds, and it looks good. Like, I don't understand why they stopped doing it. It's a charitable event. It was a great colour. Like, why did you stop this? But it's great they're doing it. Yeah, they're doing an event now where they're basically, what does it say? Apple will donate $5 for every qualifying purchase made via Apple Pay through December 7th. So it's pretty good, isn't it? Like, if you're buying something off Apple through Apple Pay, some money's going to go to them. So it's going to be a maximum of $3 million, which is a huge amount of money for a charity. So I think it's good they're doing it. Apple, get back in with partnership with Red, because you made some great products with them. Do it some more. It's what are your, like, it always felt like one of their morals was to help charities, and they're always first there with when there's been a hurricane or some horrible crisis in a country. That they're usually there donating. They should be doing more of this with some of their products. It's a good thing to do. Not enough big tech does this.
Yeah, I agree. It was a good, solid partnership. It cost them nothing in terms of sort of financials, but gain them lots of things in terms of perspective, nice looking products, a nice bold color, helping a charity, like you say, and they are there at the forefront of disaster relief. But something like this is better in the sense that it's ongoing. It's not a reactive thing. This is a continuous way of giving towards something that I think is quite important. And you're right, not enough big companies do that. You see lots of them sponsoring football teams and Formula One teams and all that kind of stuff. Not enough do this kind of thing. So I think this is good, but could be better.
Agreed.
Real-time follow-up, it was an Airbus A321 that I flew from London Heathrow to Boston Logan Airport. And my most common Airbus is an Airbus A319. So there you go. Flighty told me that.
Good old Flighty. I've never used it, but fair play.
Never used it. It's a fantastic application. Let's move on. This was a surprising one to me. A story dropped on 9 to 5 Mac this week that Apple might turn to Intel for its upcoming M series chips. I thought we were done with Intel and Apple being in the same business relationship together.
This is quite interesting, though, isn't it? This is like the Intel and Apple partnership flipping on its head, in that Intel used to make the chips and put, Intel's chips, all owned by them and their chipset put into Apple products. Now Apple are going, can you make our chips with the ARM chipset made to our specs and then give them back to us to put in our products? I think this makes a bit of sense because Intel is struggling. They need to find ways of making money. This is probably a great way for them to go. Why wouldn't they've got fabrication chops? They know what they're doing. Why wouldn't they do this for the biggest tech company in the world? And it's got to be a way of them making some money, hasn't it? Rather than turn their own chips, make others.
I think you're 100% right in all those things. And of course, the last part of that is Intel is an American company. And
if they can fab them in the States,
yeah,
why wouldn't they do that?
So they're diversifying away from, they've got a bit of a safety net when it comes to making them in China, making them in Vietnam, making them in India, but also now being able to make something in the United States as well, potentially in Intel's fabs. With another American company, that's going to look good to the current administration.
Yeah, and near where I live is where Intel were based in the UK. And they've nothing but downsized, obviously, in recent times. It's quite sad.
It's funny, I'm going to pull up the next story now about Apple's lazy AI. But I think our sort of summary of this story, however, is that it's good. For Apple, and certainly for Intel, who need some good news, really. They haven't had very much in the way of good news at all. But as we move on to our next story about Apple's lazy AI, the very first advert at the top there is for Intel's Core ready for tomorrow's innovations. So obviously they've heard us talking.
Heard us talking. So Apple, I nearly texted you in the week about Apple's lazy AI because I was trying to use their cleanup tool and it's awful, absolutely awful. And I was like, why did I try and use this? I went and used Pixelmator, far better. Like they've got like a sticky plaster thing as their icon, and you use that, and it's way better. Now I know why Apple bought Pixelmator, because they had better tech years ago.
I would complain about Pixelmator's AI. I had some headshots done for work this week, and for some reason they put me against a grey background. And I wanted to take the background out. Pixelmator couldn't distinguish between my hair and the grey background, and I just lost all my hair. So I just, like, the top of my head was see-through. So not that great.
Did you look more like me?
I just looked like I had a very oddly shaped head.
A bit like me then. Shall we get into the story then? So what's going on here then? So Apple's lousy AI didn't stop them beating Samsung smartphone sales. So Apple have sold more smartphones than Samsung for the first time since 2011.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It is insane. You think of the volume and different markets that Samsung cover with their phones, and the sort of the be all and end all of this is business analysts are surprised that the fact that Samsung has better AI on their phones isn't more of a seller, I think. But this also looks at the second-hand market as well. So if you think, what is it? It's only iPhones 16 and above, 15 and above?
15
and
Pro.
above. 15 Pro and above actually support Apple Intelligence, and frankly are not missing much. But as you've just said with the Siri thing there, it's not been that good anyway. And I think consumers are used to that now. Everybody knows Siri is garbage, or you know exactly what you can use it for. So if I tell it to turn on the lights, it'll work 99% of the time. If I ask it to play a song for me, it'll work 70% of the time. If I ask it to write a text out for me, it'll get it right about 10% of the time. But I'm aware of that. I know its limitations. I don't expect it to improve. And I think anybody buying a second-hand Apple iPhone isn't buying it for that anyway. And you're probably not buying a Samsung device as a second-hand user for that either. What you want is something fairly reliable that you can text your mates on, scroll your Instagram, send your pictures to your mates. That's it.
People are buying, I think the majority of people buy phones for the screen and the cameras. That's 90% of what you're buying the phone for. We all thought Apple's AI only running on the 15 Pro and Euro was that's really bad. People are going to be missing out. It turns out Apple's AI effort was a complete non-event.
Yeah, it was. And last story in the news, you and I have bemoaned Apple News a few times, I think it's fair to say, and obviously we're not the only ones that are feeling the love, because CNN just pulled out of being an Apple News partner.
I think Apple News has just really struggled. It's not a great app. It's a great idea, but it's just poorly done. And they're trying to mix News and News Plus in one, and it just doesn't work. So I'm not surprised that CNN's pulled out. We don't get that many additions to it. It's obviously not the place to be.
No, and I think it's just, there's no point in rehashing it. It's not a great application. It doesn't integrate very well with anything else going on. We criticized Google for many years for its, I forget the exact acronym, but it AMP, Google AMP things that would always lead you back to Google's things and put the tracking cookies into it. When you send people Apple News links, they don't work very well. They're not very shareable. And then you've got this sort of churn with who's on there and what stories you can see in its recommendation engine and its advertising. And it's subpar.
Agreed.
I think that is it for the news, unless we missed something. Should we do a car corner?
I've just got a very brief one on Car Corner. I think I've bemoaned to you in private, but my iPhone 17 Pro and wireless CarPlay on some of my cars, it's really flaky, and I've had to go back to using a cable, and I'm not the only one. But nothing seems to be addressing it. This was something they were meant to fix in 26.01, but it's just shocking. Like CarPlay for me has been solid since about 2017 when I had wireless CarPlay, my first wireless CarPlay car. And all of a sudden, it's just been really unreliable. And I used to use my previous iPhone 15 in that car, and it was fine. So there's something going on with whatever they've done, either with the OS or the chip in my phone that's doing this. And I've not even got I have got the new Apple M1 chip, and I wonder if it's that. Because for whatever reason, it just forgets it and then can't re-find it again. It's just very bizarre.
So is yours an aftermarket head unit?
May well be.
Right. Just my flavour from reading the comments on the link that you've sent here is that official ones don't seem to suffer from it, but it's ones that may not have had their firmware upgraded recently. Can you upgrade the firmware on your aftermarket head unit?
On some you can, like on some of the little USB sticks that take wired and make it wireless, yes. On this particular one I can't, but it just seems strange to me that it worked fine with my 15 Pro, and not one issue. And then all of a sudden the 17, it's been an issue. And I was running the same iOS because I ran the beta on both phones.
I mean, it is interesting that my kids have wired CarPlay in their Golf. So it's a 2019 Golf, maybe a 2018 Golf. So it does have CarPlay, but it's wired CarPlay, and it's USB-A at that. So I bought one of those 20 quid dongles from Amazon to turn into wireless. If there was issues with it, I would hear about it, believe me, because they're not backwards and coming forwards with this kind of stuff. So it's clearly still working on older iPhones.
Yeah, and I have that dongle in one of my cars, and it's fine. And in my other car, I've got a different head unit, and it's just not working at all. It's really bizarre. But infuriating, because the whole reason I put the CarPlay in there was so I can have maps and have it really convenient. Anyway, I've gone back to using cable. It's fine.
Well, at least you've got a workaround. Media?
Let's do it.
So I've been on a bit of a film kick this week. I've done pretty well, if I do say so myself. I have managed to watch all three Bourne films, Ultimatum, Identity, and Supremacy. Not quite in one hit. I did two one night and one the next. And it's just to say how absolutely terrific all three Bourne films are. I'm ignoring the fact there's two more. They don't exist as far as I'm concerned. There are only three Bourne films. They are the ones starring Matt Damon from 2002 to 2007, I think it was. And they're terrific.
They were great films. I remember when the Bourne Identity came out. What a film. Fantastic. I was listening to a podcast about this just recently. I've been listening to a lot of film podcasts recently. It's such a great film. Like, it really cemented Matt Damon as an action star, didn't it? Like, because he wasn't an overly action star before this, but he did Bourne Identity, and it was like, wow, it was so good. Love it.
Yeah, there's lots of nice touches in it. It's an interesting film. It's got good casting. There's actors for the future pop up in them that you aren't really expecting. Like Clive Owen is one of the hitmen who goes after Jason Bourne at one point within this film. Brian Cox is obviously in it. Then went on to have massive success in Succession. He was sort of better known in the UK, I think, at this point. But a very well directed film. And of course, for me, looking at it again through the sort of window of sort of Andor and some of the later things that are on Disney Plus, bringing Star Wars and like a spy story together, finding out that Tony Gilroy wrote them both, really said a lot to me. It's no wonder they're so excellent. Tony Gilroy really has a handle on this kind of stuff.
And there's some great car chases, didn't they? Really cool car chases.
Every film has a car chase. Normally quite. I think the one in the first one, Identity with the Mini, is probably the best of all three. To be fair,
really good. And apparently that was filmed not by the main director, but predominantly by the second director. And apparently it's in Paris, I think. And they were saying that actually, if you knew Paris and you watched the car chase, the chase makes no sense because obviously they picked streets based upon how they would come across on the camera. But it was just great, and it was great to see European cities as well. I think that really helped.
Well, it's definitely got that Bond feel about it, sort of globe-trotting around the world, things happening. And I think, Casino Royale definitely was influenced by Bourne when they relaunched Bond with Daniel Craig. And he goes all parkour and sort of a bit hardcore, and the fights were a bit more extreme and all the rest of it. It's definitely Bourne influencing Bond, in the same way that Bond obviously influenced Bourne to begin with. So yeah, terrific films. All of them over 90%. Well, I think they all deserve to be over 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. Only a Bourne Ultimatum actually is. But Bourne Supremacy is a better film than that. Bourne Identity. They should be in the 90s.
Agreed. And actually, I think you've spurred me on. I was thinking about rewatching Identity. I think I might need to get on with that.
You should get on with that. Carl Urban is, of course, in Bourne Supremacy, which he took me slightly by surprise. And Daniel Bruhl shows up in Bourne Ultimatum, who is now a much better known actor in Marvel. He's obviously in Hunt with Chris Hemsworth and things like that. He's a really good actor as well.
I love when you list actors in films I've never heard of, and I think I'm usually doing all right, but I'm obviously not.
Have you seen Hunt?
No.
And you're a Formula One fan?
Oh, yeah, okay. Sorry, yes, I have seen that film a long time ago.
So maybe watch it again. It's one of the few Formula One films, other than Senna, of course, that I really enjoy.
Fair enough. No, Senna's a fantastic documentary film. Hunt I have seen, but yeah, a while ago. Sorry, I thought you'd talk about a more recent film. My mistake.
No, Hunt. I deliberately referenced it because it had cars in it, and I know you like a bit of car action.
Love cars.
So anyway, that's that. Go out and watch the Bourne films if you haven't seen them already. And if you haven't seen them in 10 years, watch them again because they still absolutely stand up.
Yeah, no, agreed.
I went something a bit more recent last night. I went to watch the new iteration of The Running Man, which I, unlike the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, thoroughly enjoyed. I thought it was a great little film that just romps along. First thing I've seen starring Glenn Powell in a sort of major role. Obviously, I knew he was in Top Gun Maverick and things like that.
Twisters.
Never seen it.
The remake of Twister.
Never seen it.
The original's better.
Never seen it.
You never seen Twister?
I have no interest in Twister. I know it had Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt in it, but it just didn't appeal to me in any way.
I think I liked it because I remember going to cinema with my older brother to go see it, and I didn't often go much. I was like the annoyingly younger brother got dragged along to cinema once, and that's probably why I finally enjoy it. I'm curious to see The Running Man because I actually enjoyed the Arnie one, and I was curious to see what Edgar Wright, the director, has done with it. He's obviously the director of the Cornetto trilogy and Baby Driver, which I absolutely love. And I was just curious to see what his take was on it because I just love his style. I think he's got a really cool style.
Yep, and Scott Pilgrim, of course, one of the coolest movies ever made.
Of course.
No, I think it's a good film. The critics only gave it 64%. The audience are much more generous at 79%. I'd call it a non-stop action thriller. That's what I'd call it, with a certain amount of humour, with a little bit of, commentary on the way society has gone. But that's not surprising. It's based on a Stephen King novel. The Stephen King novel is closer to this film than what the Arnie film was. Obviously, Arnie was at the height of his action success when they made the original Running Man film. This is closer to what Stephen King had in mind for a dystopian society ruled by corporations where the poor only get poorer and the rich only get richer. And I think that's probably not a million miles away from where we are at the moment. It's a good film. It's interesting if you know the character of Killian. The names and things keep coming up from like the main character called Ben Richards, same as he was in the first one. So they've sort of moved the roles around a little bit. The guy they've got, whose name I forget actually, the actor who's playing sort of the Running Man show's announcer. No, that's not Lee Pace. I can't.
It's further on, isn't it?
I was surprised to see Lee Pace in this film actually, because Lee Pace is always a terrific actor and worth watching. And lots of things. Why can't I find this actor?
Is that Daniel Ezra?
No, it's not Daniel Ezra. That's terrible. I mean,
surely he's quite a main character.
He's maybe the fourth main character. That's not good enough, frankly. I can't find him. There he is, Coleman Domingo. It's terrific. He's great as the as sort of the host that leads the Running Man TV show that they're featuring it. I'd go and check it out and go and see it in the cinema. I think it's definitely one to watch on the bigger screen.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind to go. I've seen the trailer of it and I thought, actually, I quite fancy a bit of this.
We've gone long on that, so I'll very quickly talk about Down Cemetery Road. Have you been watching this on Apple TV Plus?
No, but I did finish the third book, but I haven't yet gone and watched the first TV series.
I don't know what it is I don't like about this. It's funny, we talked about The Running Man being the sort of wrong way round, that I'm more with the audience and less with the critics, and it's the case with this as well. The audience seem to be enjoying this at 66%, but the critics rate it more highly. Sorry, it's all right. Sorry.
The books are quite jumpy, and I'm curious I think I've already said it, I'm curious to see how they're going to do it, but I don't know. I've enjoyed the book. I don't want to ruin it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I think most of the acting in it's very good, particularly the guys they've got playing the soldiers in it. I think that both the one chasing them but it feels like two different shows stitched together. There's a character played by Adil Akhtar, and Adil Akhtar is a great sort of character who works for the Ministry of Defence, and it's like he's in a different film in the sense that there's some very serious drama stuff going on involving abducted children and the MOD and all sorts of things, and he seems to be in some sort of slapstick comedy, and it just doesn't hang together very well. And Ruth Jones, who's an actor, is Ruth Jones. I want to make sure of him criticised. Ruth Wilson.
Oh, Wilson.
Ruth Wilson, who's a terrific actor who I've seen in lots of things. Women in the Walls was great. Again, I'm not buying her performance, and she's just deeply irritating. And I don't know if that's a thing within the book, but I'm just really struggling with it. There's bits of it that I quite like, but it's not a flat out, this is great, go and watch it from me. I think if you've got nothing better to watch, it's better than some other things on Apple TV Plus, which is hardly a ringing endorsement.
Yeah, a character in the book, if memory serves, is why I go since I read it. She wasn't an annoying character. She does appear in some of the latter books as well. But yeah, she's more of a main character in this story than later ones, I think.
Emma Thompson's great though.
Yeah, and she looks kind of cool with her shaved head and stuff in this.
And actually, just linking back to Bourne briefly, I was watching it, and there's a couple of American characters pop up in a train journey, and one of the actors, the gentleman who appears in that, is also in the Bourne films, who appears with Dr. Hirsch as the person who initiates Bourne into the whole Treadstone program. So that was a nice little link back.
Have you ever watched the Treadstone TV show?
Why would I do that?
I don't know. I didn't realise it was a thing until the other day.
Yeah, why would I do that? You've watched a film.
I've watched a film. I'm going a bit old school at the moment. I'm a bit 2001 vibe at the minute. So I've just watched Castaway, which I don't think I've ever seen before. It doesn't ring any bells. And I think it's rated quite highly on here compared to what I would rate it right now. It's quite slow, and I was a bit gutted because I really like Tom Hanks. I really like Robert Zemeckis. I kind of get the concept, but it just felt lots of it was quite slow, and then the wrap up at the end seemed a bit quick. It was just an oddly paced film, and you suddenly jump 4 years in the middle of it, and then all of a sudden, but I don't want to give it away, but I don't know, I was a little disappointed after listening to a podcast about it saying how good it was, and I went and watched it. I was a bit
I don't mind it. I think it's a real study in Tom Hanks being able to hold a film entirely by himself. And again, I think he was at the height of his fame when he wrote this. He may arguably still be at the height of his fame, given the legend that is Tom Hanks.
He's never. Yeah, I was going to say he's never not been at the height, I think.
Yeah, well, maybe in the early days of Splash or something like that, while he was upcoming. But ever since, I don't know, Philadelphia, I think he's absolutely been at the center of cinema. And he has detractors as well. I don't mind this. It is a Tom Hanks show. I think it's quite a harrowing example of survival, really. I think I'm not giving anything away by saying that. Ironically, last time I watched this was when I was in Mexico with my family. So we'd just flown on a plane through the Caribbean to get to Mexico, and I made them watch this before we flew back, and it wasn't appreciated that I made them watch the big plane crash sequence at the start.
No, not the best. And the whole FedEx placement was a bit weird. A bit overdone.
Yeah, but not all that positive to FedEx either, I don't think. It was
not positive, but majorly overdone. It should have been there, but could have been a bit more subtle.
Yeah, I'd have gone with random delivery company X. And staying in the past, you've also been watching a TV show.
I've weirdly, again, 2001, I've weirdly gone and rewatched 2001, 24, day one. It's the first season of 24 TV shows, which when it came out, was quite a thing. It's 24 episodes. They're each an hour long, and it's a whole day of this secret agent's life or counter-terrorist agent's life. I quite enjoyed it again, actually. The rewatch was pretty good. I'd be curious to see how some of it's aged, because obviously this is pre-smartphone. but actually really enjoyed watching it. It was time well spent, I think. And I remembered bits of the story because I have seen it before. But yeah, I don't know, just fancied it. But generally enjoyed it. And Keith Sutherland was fantastic. And the story does get a little far-fetched at times, how they seem to keep losing people that they've rescued and then they get captured again. And it was like, Jesus Lord, why? Surely if you've lost them twice, maybe the third time you get them back, you'd really put some effort in making sure you don't lose them again. But no, well done, and actually stood up all right. And like, it was just quite interesting to watch something tech-ish pre having smartphones and Apple booming and all of that, because there's quite a lot of Apple products in it. Your TI book was in here. There were some Mac Pros in there. There were some great studio displays and just some. Yeah, it was good. It was of an era, and I just generally enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's not bad. I always remember watching it thinking, when does he find time to go to the toilet? Because you were following along pretty much in real time, and it is 24 hours. And he spends a lot of it either sitting in a chair in the CTU. Have I got that right? Was it CTU? And
Counter-terrorism unit.
And I remember the ringtones on there being quite iconic. I got my office phone to do the same thing, so I felt like it was in CTU. I would be interesting to go back and watch it, really, I think. I remember it falling off quite rapidly in latter seasons, though.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, how is he not super cranky in like hour 20? You know, he's been awake for 20 hours straight. He was just about to go to bed at the start of this. Like, you'd be miserable, wouldn't you? And just fed up of the whole thing. But anyway, quite enjoyed it. It was a good watch and very well done, I think, the way they plotted the 24-hour window. So, and the guy who plays the president, he's fantastic. I love him.
Dennis Haysbert.
That's the guy. He's awesome, because I just like him in Heat. He was in a minor part in Heat, the film from '95. Then he's in this. I just think he's awesome. I think he's got great screen presence.
We talked about him being in Major League as well. The Ted Lasso inspiration.
Oh yeah. I think he's awesome. I just really like his whole demeanour. I thought really good. Should we go on to games?
No. Have we done your homework, Chris?
Master and Commander.
Master and Commander.
I haven't watched it, but I've downloaded it on iTunes, so I've got it ready, and it's lined up for some point this week. I'm doing some travel this week, so there should be time in a hotel when I'm bored to pop this on. I'm
going to hold you to it next week. Moving on.
I must confess, though, I did watch the start of Gladiator 2.
Okay.
After listening to a podcast about Gladiator 1. Have you seen Gladiator
2? No.
Disappointing.
I think there's a reason I haven't seen Gladiator 2 yet, and that's because of that reaction they just gave.
It was just all a bit. Pedro Pascal's in it, lots of CGI in it, and it was just a bit. I don't know. I'm really disappointed.
We'll move on to games, but just on that, it was quite comforting watching the Bourne films and the car chases and knowing that it was all done in practical effects in the same way that the Blues Brothers was like 20 years before that. If there is something, there's a heft to more practical effects. I'm not saying it didn't have any special effects, but
yeah. I think there's a balance to be had, and we're too far one way, aren't we, at the moment? And sometimes when you watch a slightly older film that's got some less CGI, more realistic stunts, it can be a bit more enjoyable.
Totally. Games, which has been up on the screen for a while. This very, very rapidly in games. This one just caught my eye. It's by the team that made Time Splitters, an old Nintendo game, and GoldenEye, another old Nintendo game, are trying a Scrabble variant of Balatro, so that's got my attention immediately. I've played far too much Balatro. I refuse to even look at the time spent on my PlayStation and in Steam for how long I've spent playing Balatro. I like a bit of wordplay, so this has absolutely got my attention. It's called Beyond Words. It's available as a demo now on Steam if you've got something that'll play it, like a Steam Deck or a Windows PC or any other sort of Linux-based thing that runs Steam. And I just think this looks quite interesting, and I downloaded the demo just before we had the podcast, and I'm quite keen to go and have a play with it.
It does look cool. I, being quite dyslexic, I'm awful at word games. That's my problem.
Anyway, I just like the look of this. There's a little YouTube video, and it's got upgrades. It's very Balatro, Slay the Spire, all that kind of stuff, right up my neck of the world. So I'm quite keen to go and have a go at that later.
Yeah, I think my wife would like this game.
There you go. And then last but not least, we've been talking about the new Steam machines that are incoming. If you wanted something like it right now, this caught my eye this week. It's not a Black Friday sale, but Minisforum, who make tiny little PCs for servers, for AI applications, for all sorts of things. Quite a growing brand, really, certainly in the creator community and people who like to build their own server things at home and all the rest of it. The Minisforum Atomman G1 Pro, the well-named thing, is available now for £1,359, which for this kind of machine, doesn't actually seem that bad when you look at the spec. It's got a Ryzen 9, it's got an RTX Nvidia 5060 in it. That's a fairly serious graphics card. I think it's about as good as you can get. 2 SSD slots, so you can have up to 8 terabytes. DDR5 RAM, you can have up to 96 gigabytes. With 32 gigs RAM and a 1 terabyte is tested, it's 1,400 quid. Now, I would hope the Steam machines come in cheaper than that, but that's a very powerful gaming PC in a small package.
Looks a bit like a PlayStation, like a better PlayStation 5, because it's not got some stupid curve in it that makes no sense.
Yeah, I would say if I was in the market for a gaming PC and I wanted integrated, I didn't want a separated graphics chip, this is going to do you for 3 to 5 years, I think. Not bad at all.
Yeah, no, it does look cool.
And Wi-Fi 7, of course, unlike most of Apple's line.
Weirdly, yeah.
Shall we do a very rapid main show?
Let's do it.
So, I just thought we might have 5 minutes to think about where the Vision Pro is. You've tried one, I haven't. And this was spurred on by a video I watched from Becca Versace, who used to be a journalist at The Verge and has sort of spun out on her own. And she decided she was going to replace all of the screens in her life with a Vision Pro for a month, or at least a couple for a couple of weeks to try and do that. And it's a really interesting review, and I can skip this advert now and get on to Becca's thing. And she goes through, what am I replacing here? I'm replacing my monitor, I'm trying to replace my TV, I'm trying to replace my smartphone, the screens that you use in your life. And it's a very thoughtful, well-done review, but just made me reflect on, that's obviously possible to a certain degree, and not to spoil Becca's video, because I think, give a YouTuber a click and go off and watch it. Her screen one, her main display, didn't really do the job, even though she's an Apple user. She can use the Apple virtual display, I think it's called, where you can project a bigger version of the display you've got into the Vision Pro's space and then just use it like that. It was just not quite as sharp as what she wanted it to be, and I think that's a common complaint for people who try to use it, except Casey List. But then he, as he says himself, his eyes aren't maybe 100% of what other people see, and that seems to be a common thing, that if you're buying it to replace a big display, that's not a thing. Did you get to try this as part of your demo?
No, the demo, I think Apple's demo is a bit rubbish, because they just really handhold you to real basic stuff, whereas you kind of want to go, look, I've seen all this. Can I do the slightly pro demo of how does it work with my Mac? What's the practicalities like? And I know quite a bit about computers. I want to go a bit deeper. They don't really seem to do that.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. So she talks about her main primary screen. She talks about her laptop. And in that case, it is better because you have suddenly got a huge amount of space when you're sitting on an airplane or something like that. It kind of makes sense in that scenario. Screen 4, the living room TV, I think was fine, except when this is your common problem with it, I think, when you're with your partner and you're trying to watch something else with it, you both need to be in for $3,500, dollars on Vision Pros, and that's just not practical and not that great a shared experience anyway. However, if you're traveling, sleeping, trying to be quiet, whatever, you have then got that massive display with you. But what you're seeing with all these screens that you got, and just to finish off with a smartphone, when you look down at a smartphone with the cameras inside the Vision Pro, unless you've got it paired, it flickers, and it's obvious that you're not looking, it's got the refresh rate problem that you often have when you're looking at things with cameras. So I think that's a problem if you just look at it as a pure screen replacement. So I don't know how you feel about all that, but just on that, it doesn't feel like it's hitting the mark for what you want a $3,500 device to do. And that's...
I think I'd worry a little bit that you're surely not doing your eyes any good with not having any natural daylight coming in or anything like that. The bit I often, and I've said it before, is like playing PlayStation with my son. We often play together, even though he could see me on the screen. If I was wearing the VR stuff, I just don't feel like you're that engaged. You can't just turn around and look him in the eyes kind of thing. And that's why I haven't really gone for any VR. I quite fancy getting one of these Vision Pros. I always have, but they're just too much money to even just have a flutter. I was hoping with the M2 ones, they might be a bit cheaper on eBay or something, but they're not really hitting that mark. I think it's an interesting experiment, but I just don't think it's there yet. And like you say, I would imagine it's quite straining on the eyes if it's a bit fuzzy, and with the foveated rendering, it's got to be quite a bit of eye strain, I would have thought. I would imagine long term this probably isn't good for you.
No, and in Becca's point here is, she's got longer hair than you and I have got. particularly you, perhaps.
It's not hard for me.
But she says the straps really mess with your hair. If you wear them for any period of time, then you end up, with all helmet hair effectively for what's going on. And the weight and heat continuously on your face, and it's resting on your cheekbones, even with the improved straps and things like that, are a significant problem. So I think there's issues with wearing a device like this. There's the socialization, the fact that it's not good enough to replace your main screen all the time, good enough for a laptop. But frankly, I don't mind looking at my laptop screen. Where if I'm going to be very, very constrained, then you just got to get on with it and deal with the limitations. It's a luxury to have $3,500 to spend on a slightly bigger display that sort of hangs in space around you that most people don't have. And then the second part of it, which it doesn't go into in too much in her video, but this recent article in Ars Technica does, is the almost complete lack of supported software that embrace the VR experience. And we hear about Apple Tech Podcast and other people, Accidental Tech Podcast and others talking about that too. So you don't have Apple really releasing lots of content to make the best use of the device, compounded by developers actively pulling away from the device. And I think it's going to be a great failure. I think it's Apple's Mac Pro that's stuck to your face. Unless they can release a cheaper one more quickly, they're going to have their lunches eaten by Meta Ray-Bans and all that kind of stuff, where you have an AR experience, not a VR experience. And I think this product was too little too late without the sort of development push that Apple really should have put behind it.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Why haven't Apple released all their own apps for it and, constantly iterated? And we've said it before with some of the software like Apple Music, it would move on more if it was a one person show developing it, because they're just not iterating, and you can't get all of Apple's iWork suite on it natively, which is just crazy after this, and we're a couple of years in. So I think that's been a little frustrating. And their price, I can't believe they've done nothing to try and just get that cost base down, and get Netflix on board. Some of this stuff is a no-brainer.
I 100% agree. And the reviewer from Ars Technica here, he says here's the software he uses every day on his Mac: Firefox, Spark, Todoist, Obsidian, Raycast, Slack, Visual Studio Code, Claude 1 Password. None of those are supported.
That's crazy, isn't it? And they're all quite mainstream stuff. Apple should be working with these guys and incentivizing them to get the apps on there and make the Vision Pro so desirable that people will want to spend the money. Whereas at the moment, like I say, I would like to try it, but I can't afford it, and I just don't think I'd use it enough.
I mean, if you just picked one of the biggest browsers in the world, Firefox, and Slack, one of the biggest communication tools of this, both of which I use every day for work, every day, and they're not there. So immediately it's a non-starter.
Yeah, it's true. And I think if I tried to use one of these at work to join a meeting, I would just have the mickey ripped out of me for having a persona as me. I think people would just go to town on me because they wouldn't get it.
Yeah. So I think it's fair to say that unless Apple do something fairly drastic fairly quickly, this is probably a niche product that's only going to get nicher and it will eventually just be killed.
Or they actually release a version 3, which is a complete step away from where they are now, which actually deals with all these issues. It'll be interesting to see where they end up.
I just think they spent a load of development time and just shoved it out the door, even though it wasn't ready as a tech preview or a developer review. But the problem is the developers haven't bit into it. If this had been a $1,200, maybe even a $1,500 product, I think they'd have got many, many, many more people on board. But it's just too much.
I think £1,500. It's a lot of money, but a lot of people, if it was cool and compelling, people would find it.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Anyway, that's all we've got to say about that. We were going to do a discussion on light phones, but I think we're going a bit long, Chris, so we'll just move on and do App of the Week.
Let's do it.
So my App of the Week this week isn't really an App of the Week. It's a website, and it's a well-known website called XKCD. So this is Randall Munro, who's been drawing XKCD cartoons for practically as long as I've been using the internet, I think. Certainly in the last 10 years, but they're very famous. You see them pop up in all sorts of things. And he's got stick figures, basically, are his thing. But he's clearly a scientist of some sort. Very thoughtful guy. Amazing books. In fact, I've got one on my shelf next door, What If 2, where somebody gives them a ridiculous scenario like, what if everybody on the Earth jumped up and down at the same time? What would happen to the planet? And he properly goes into it. Does the physics, does the chemistry, does the calculations are in it, tells you what happens. Anyway, this, I thought it was worth mentioning today, just because he's done a 10-year special and a 15-year one of clearly him and his partner having got a cancer diagnosis and taking it every day at a time. And it's worth reading it. I will say no more than to say it made me tear up at the end. I don't think a cartoon has ever made me tear up before. But it's a beautiful thing. Extremely well illustrated, extremely well told. I'm beginning to well up at the thought of it again now, actually. It's a very nice thing indeed. So it's acutely observed, well written, and just every time is a joy to read. And this is no different. So, yeah, XKCD. If you've never heard of it, check it out.
Yeah, I would. I'd concur with that. I think it's a good cartoon. And like you say, it's always been really well done. So, yeah, I think it's good.
There you go. Thing of the week.
So I've gone with just F1 because today is the penultimate round of F1 for this year, and they may or may not determine who the winner is today of the championship. The manufacturers already McLaren, they won it months ago, and it was largely a done deal all year. But the drivers is coming down to the last two races, and I've just generally enjoyed the theatre of it. Some of the races have sadly been a little dull. Lewis Hamilton has had a nightmare in the Ferrari, but this is the last year on this regs, so we're going to come back in 26, so cars are all going to be different, and there's going to be Audi in the mix, and there's going to be Cadillac in the mix, and so it's going to be quite cool next year. But it's just an exciting end to the race, and I'm literally going to hang up on you in a second and go and watch it, and there'll be a happy 2 hours spent. Hopefully there's a bit of action on track, because the little race yesterday was a little dull. The problem with some of the cars and the tracks are they're just not suited for overtaking. Obviously, what you want to see is lots of overtaking, lots of excitement. But I've just enjoyed the machine that is Formula One this year.
Fair enough. You should watch motorcycle racing, more overtaking.
Yeah, I probably quite enjoy motorcycle racing. I just like racing, to be honest with you. I just love it.
It might be my challenge next year is you and I can watch a race together.
Oh, that sounds like a good challenge. My brother and I are trying to do an F1 abroad, so maybe you and I could do some form of MotoGP somewhere.
Sounds like a plan. I think we call that a show, Chris.
I think so. So if anyone wants to get in contact, Rod is at g5medic at mastodon.scot. He's also on Blue Sky, where he's at g5medic.bsky.social. I'm on Mastodon, and I'm at _CJP at mastodon.social. You can watch it on YouTube by going to our website and click on the YouTube link, or you can drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.